The desert wind howled like a wounded beast across the endless stretch of burnt sand. A single wagon creaked under the merciless sun, dragged by two fading mules. Inside sat Elias Crane, a farmer whose heart had long since hardened to stone, and beside him his wife Lena, pale from exhaustion and silence. The trail ahead shimmered with heat, the promise of California far beyond what their courage could reach. They had started this journey together, full of hope and vows. But months on the road had turned love into something brittle, a weapon ready to snap. Elias blamed Lena for every failed crop, every broken wheel, every night spent under a sky that offered no rain. She had become, in his eyes, another burden strapped to the wagon. That morning, when the wheel cracked and the wagon tilted, his rage broke loose. "You useless woman!" he shouted, grabbing the reins so violently the mules whinnied. Lena tried to calm him, her voice trembling. "Elias, please, it's just a wheel. We can fix it together." But the fire in him was already too wild. "Together? You're nothing but a curse," he barked. In one motion he pushed her hand away, then shoved harder. She stumbled backward off the moving wagon, falling into the dust with a cry that tore through the wind. The wagon rolled on, leaving her coughing in the swirling sand, her bonnet tumbling away like a ghost of the life she'd lost. For a long while Lena lay still, too shocked to move. The sun beat down, cruel and unrelenting. Her mouth was dry, her throat raw, but she forced herself up. The wagon was already a fading speck on the horizon. She looked around. Nothing but dunes, silence, and the whisper of death. Yet as fate would have it, she wasn't alone. From behind a ridge, a shadow emerged. A rider on a painted horse, gliding silently through the dust. He wore no badge, no spurs that jingled, only the earth-toned garb of his people. His eyes were sharp as flint. He was Tawa, an Apache scout who had seen the cruelty of both nature and man, but never ignored a cry of pain. He dismounted and approached cautiously. "You're hurt," he said, his voice calm, deep, like the desert itself. Lena nodded weakly. My husband left me." She couldn't meet his gaze. Tawa studied her, torn dress, bleeding palms, fear in her eyes, and something stirred in him. An old wound he thought he'd buried. "You shouldn't die for his sin," he said simply, extending a hand. He helped her onto his horse, and together they rode toward the shade of a canyon, where a stream whispered between the rocks. There he let her drink, and she wept, not just for the pain, but for the mercy of a stranger. "Why would you help me?" she asked. Tawa looked into the distance. "Because once," he said quietly, "someone didn't." That night, as the fire flickered between them, Lena told her story of the drought, the debt, and the cruelty that had replaced love. Tawa listened without interrupting, his gaze fixed on the flames. "He thinks you're gone," he finally said. "And maybe that's how you'll be, gone to him. But not to yourself." Lena looked up at the stars, feeling something she hadn't felt in years. The first flicker of hope. But far out in the darkness, another sound rose, the faint creak of wagon wheels and the distant call of a man. Elias was lost too, circling the desert with guilt creeping in like a fever. The desert wasn't finished with him yet. Morning broke red and cold, painting the canyon walls in blood-colored light. Tawa was already awake, scanning the horizon, his horse restless beneath him. "He's near," he murmured. Lena felt her heart twist, part fear, part anger. "Elias?" she whispered. Tawa nodded. "A man who abandons will one day return to what he fears most." He saddled his horse, motioning for her to stay low. Lena watched him ride out, his silhouette cutting through the sunlight like a blade. She didn't want revenge. She wanted peace. But deep down, she knew men like Elias didn't understand mercy. They only understood power. Elias rode into the canyon an hour later, his wagon limping, one wheel cracked, his face burnt and desperate. "Lena," he called out, the name tasting strange on his tongue. He wasn't sorry, not truly. He wanted his helper back, his servant, his comfort. But instead of Lena's voice, the only reply was a sudden echo, a horse's whinny, a shadow dropping from the cliff above. Tawa rode down, eyes cold, bow in hand, an arrow drawn tight. Elias froze, eyes wide. "You stay back, savage," he barked, reaching for the rifle beside him. But Tawa didn't flinch. "You left her to die," he said calmly. "Now the desert will judge. You." Elias fired first, a crack that echoed through the canyon, but the bullet struck only stone. Before he could reload, Tawa's arrow sliced through the air, striking the rifle from his grip. Elias stumbled backward, his pride crumbling faster than his courage. "She's my wife," he screamed. "She belongs to me." Tawa dismounted slowly, walking forward. "A woman is not a thing to own," he said. "You threw her like she was nothing. Now you'll learn what nothing feels like." Lena, trembling, stepped from behind the rocks. Elias turned toward her, face softening with shock. "Lena, thank God, I came back for you." She stared at him, tears streaking through the dust on her cheeks. "You came back for yourself," she said quietly. "I was never yours to break." Her voice carried across the canyon, strong and clear. For the first time, Elias saw her not as the woman who obeyed, but as the one who endured. He tried to step closer, but Tawa's hand rose, silent as a command. "Leave her path," Tawa warned. Elias hesitated, then spat into the dust, mounting the wagon with a snarl. "You'll die out here without me," he growled. But Lena didn't answer. She only watched as he rode off into the horizon, the same direction he'd thrown her, and never looked back. The desert swallowed him. Some say his wagon broke down a day later, and that the vultures finished what his greed began. Others say he wandered until the sun burned away his name. But Lena lived. She stayed in the canyon for weeks, learning from Tawa how to ride, how to track, how to listen to the wind instead of men's voices. In time, her scars became strength, her silence became will. When she finally rode out beside him toward the next sunrise, she no longer looked like the farmer's wife who had been thrown from a wagon. She looked like a survivor, reborn in the dust. And as the fire faded behind them, the wind carried one truth. Across the desert, sometimes justice doesn't come with a badge or a law. Sometimes it rides by when you least expect it, and it never needs a sheriff.